Hi everybody, Roxanne here. So I'm in my studio this morning because it is like 14, I don't know, it's like really cold out today and the wind is whipping. I think there's like a feels like temperature of 5 degrees. It's brutal. So I took my walk in an indoor public building here in town. Hey, you're protected. And then I am doing a winter sketch from, it's one of my little dailies, and I'm using my sketchbook from one of my winter walk sketches. Actually, gosh, almost 3 years ago to the day. This was January 8th in 2022, and there was a snowfall, and I wanted to, revisit that with the scene from my previous walk, because I really don't want to go out there in the wind. We had this really lovely tiny snowfall, just a dusting. I know a lot of areas, man, across the whole Midwest and into the Mid-Atlantic got a ton of snow. I mean, a wicked ton. So I am painting this little stone wall. This is in a local park. It's a woodsy preserve, and it's really fun to go for a short little hike in all seasons. It's really pretty. Winter in particular, because there's, it used to be an old farm, and so there's all these stone walls, and when snow falls on stone, I think it's the loveliest thing. Anyway, I have drawn everything out on I do these 10-minute sketch walks in winter where I'm just drawing a line drawing. I take my sketchbook and an ink pen, and that is it. I come back and I throw in the paint with what I remember. And then I've got like this lovely scene from the day. They're, really pretty basic sketches, are not that complicated, but it's a way to get out into the landscape and observe. And so I've been wanting to make some paintings from some of these scenes. So I'm going back to this stone wall thing, and I've mixed up a nice little gray out of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. If you push it towards more sienna, you get a warmer gray. If you push it more towards the blue, you'll get a cooler gray. It's my favorite gray to mix because it's really useful. I always keep my scratch paper nearby just to test my colors. So I'm just filling in. I don't even have these drawn in. I just kind of drew in the big shapes, but all the little details are going to be just brushed in. So I'm making stone shapes, and things, your paint, your watercolors will dry about 20% later than what you lay down. I like to have a little bit of variety. The stones are sort of grayish, but they can range in their color variety. And I'm leaving white spaces for where the snow kind of hangs on top of these and heaps up on the ground, which I didn't do that. All right, so I want to lay in these background trees next, and the sky. Let's get the sky in here. I think I might do just a gentle wet into wet wash. So let's lay down some water. We'll brush that in with a flat brush. I want to go around my banner. Normally I don't make these little banners, but for this little project, I thought this would be fun. I'm just trying to get through January. If I get through January, I think I only started on the 5th. But if I can get through the rest of January, maybe I will continue on through February. I'll take it a month at a time and see how this goes. Anyway, for this little series, I've been doing a cute little border and a banner with the date, which as a landscape artist, I've never really made space for a banner, but as a sketchbook artist, it's like, hey, anything goes, you know? Sketchbooks are fun. They are, I love sketchbooks for travel journals and just daily life journals. All right, so when I lay down a wet into wet and I get the areas wet, I kind of make sure that I have all the areas covered that I want and that nothing's drying out. I look to make sure there's this even sheen, no big puddles, because that's going to all just backwash into whatever you put in. But if you have dry spots, then you're going to get this dry, grabby mark. So I check to see that everything's kind of glistening about the same amount. And let's go. I should have actually had this mixed up earlier, but let's throw in a little bit of cobalt blue. I'm going to maybe just gray down that. I'm going to grab some of that gray and kind of tone down that sky. Just a bit. It's pretty bright out there today, but I'm going to tone this down just for the sake of this snowy day scene. And I think the rest of the sky, I'm just going to let that color run down a little bit. It should just flow into the water. I think I might have dropped in an extra ton. So what I might do is just like blot up this little extra bit that's kind of soaking down here. You can see some of this pigment just kind of running down. Get it around my banner. Usually when you just tap that into these wet areas, it'll just soak up any excess, kind of like a wet vac. I just pull the, dry out my brush, tap that on these wet edges just to dry. It just kind of siphons it up. Because the water and pigment will run into, kind of like by capillary action. So it'll go from anything soaking wet to, it'll run down into all this wet area. And then where it's dry, where you've stopped painting, it usually will stop running. All right, so I've got that. Now, next thing I want to do is paint this tree line. I think I'm going to run a little bit of heat on this just to dry up any of that extra stuff. While that's going on, I'm going to mix my next color. And I'm going to put in a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of rose of ultramarine, and it kind of makes this sort of a gray purpley color, which is what a lot of the woods look like. So I am going to make trees out of that. And I'm just going to brush them up. And remember, in the distant tree line, you're just looking at a massive hunk of trees. And then to just give a little bit of grayed out variety, because it's not all just one mass, flat mass of color. There is variety in that. I don't want to get too heavy-handed with this dark gray either. I'm going to make some branches coming up. And then while this is still wet, I gave my brush a swish of water. I'm gonna take this and kind of loosen all of that pigment up there. So you can still see some of those little twigs, but then you've got this a little, you've got this mass of color. So a lot of times, like when you look at a mass of trees in the winter where all the trees are bare, and there's like a gazillion little twigs up there, and you don't really see everyone. You kind of see this mass of them against the sky. I'm going to drop in some warmer browns too. So, and to do that, I just plopped in a little bit of burnt sienna into that same puddle. You can see that puddle has that rose of ultramarine blue, and some burnt sienna. And I keep, a little bit, some that's more purple, some that's kind of leans towards brown, some that leans towards that gray blue. I just keep going. Making my trees. Pulling in a little variety here and there. Now I've made it evergreen, that's a little bit closer than that distant tree line, so I'm going to just paint around that. And so I've got this paint, it's not runny like tea or coffee, maybe like coffee. There's a batch of trees that goes up a little higher, but definitely not as heavy as cream. So I don't want this version super heavy. Now, let me swish all the pigment out. And I've got kind of a damp brush. I'm going to hit those top branches, let them kind of run together. If I feel like I'm picking up too much pigment, I'm going to swish that out. And have that come behind my evergreen and down to the wall. I'm going to do the same thing up here before that gets too dry. If it gets dried out, it's harder to soften those edges. You can, kind of, but it's kind of like trying to reconstitute dried paint on the page, and it doesn't work really well. Anyway, there we go. Now I've got one little corner up there. So I pull a little bit of brown into that. So you can see as I'm working, this little puddle continues to change, but it definitely has an element of the purple and the brown and the dark blue in there. But I don't want it to read as too black. That just gets a little too harsh for anything that's in the distance. Let's see if I've got enough pigment to soften and make that look like tree branches in the distance. Okay, I'm gonna let that totally dry before I come in with these evergreens and stuff on top. Then let's see, I've got a bunch of weeds and reeds in the ground up here, and I don't know why I made that mark. That was kind of like a stray mark. I don't know if I can lift it. Sometimes if I do a little bit of a tickle and blot, I can get stray marks to come up, or at least soften them so they're not quite so evident. So again, it's just what I call the tickle and blot. You just take the tip of a damp brush, lay a paper towel, and use soap. You don't want to scrub it or you'll rough up the paper so much it's just irretrievable. Okay, and then in the near foreground, I've got this, I don't know what kind of, they're like weeds and brambles, and there's, you know, just whatever the weedy stuff that's growing on the field edges out there. It's, I mean, just weeds and reeds, and some of it is really gold, and some of it's this kind of a rich red almost. Now some of my stone wall is still wet. That's probably where that came from. I'm going to hit that with a little heat because I don't want the reeds running into the color. I want them to lay over it since it's in front of it. And while I'm at it, I'll just dry that distant tree line as well. A little wet over here. Okay, that's pretty quick. And this is not a hairdryer, by the way. It's called a Ranger heated craft tool. It just puts out heat without a lot of force. And the heat from that thing really dries your paper up pretty quickly. And I can see my edge has popped off and is curling. Let me get a clip. I want this to lay flat. Don't know why some of them do that. This is a little pad of Fluid 100. Looks like that. All cotton paper. It's really nice, and it's not as toothy. I mean, it's a cold press, but it's not as toothy as, say, Arches. All right, now I'm gonna figure out how I want to do these reeds and weeds, and there's a good bit of kind of a reddish color in here. So I'm gonna pull in some with this cadmium red hue into one side of this puddle and see if I can, that's still a little bit of brown. Let's just pull some of that over here, and that's a little closer to what I remember. And I'm gonna start with some of that, and I'm just gonna have some of these weedy brambles coming up like this. I'm up on the very tip of my brush. This thing has a really nice point on it. It's from Rosemary Brushes out of the UK. They have such wonderful supply. I mean, their brushes are amazing. And I just recently got this set. It is a sable blend and has a nice little bit of snap. Holds a lot of pigment. I'm loving this. All right, now, so I just remember there was all these kind of funky little scribbly brambles that go in all directions. There's some that's kind of gray and some that's gold. Let me find a gold that I think and actually maybe quinacridone gold. Let's see if I need to, I think that's actually a good one because it's, for things in a woodsy gray environment, that gold really shows up so nicely. Let's see if I can pop some of that in. Oops, I think I have a bit of sweater fuzz in here. So I don't want it to blend with the red that I just put down there, so I'm hoping, yeah, that seems to have dried pretty quickly. And if the red becomes too faint, I can always go back with a second round of stuff. And I want some of this, you know, some of it gets kind of high and these little weedy brambles, and I don't want it to look like flames either, so I need to kind of get the other gray brambly stuff in there. Let's see. All right, now if I do this while this is all really wet, I'm just going to end up with one big blob. So let's try this. And you see that heat dries things up pretty quickly. While that is drying, I'm going to mix up a puddle of green that I want for this evergreen, and I'm going to use some green Apatite Genuine and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I'm going to have that down here on my palette as well. And let's see, let's put these trees. I like that green Apatite Genuine because it is a granulating color, and then drop in a little bit of ultramarine here and there, and wow, it's just really beautiful. Sometimes I'll drop in just a little bit of New Gamboge just to warm it up. These, I don't want to call them ratty looking, but these really gnarly looking evergreens have a bit of warm and cool green to them. I like the green Apatite Genuine because it is a granulating color, and as it granulates out, there's like this bronziness that comes out of it, which has this really beautiful look to it. All right, while that's wet, let's grab a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I'll just drop that in some of the areas. I don't want to get too heavy-handed with the ultramarine blue. Sometimes it can dry almost opaque looking if it gets too thick. I'm going to drop in a little bit of this New Gamboge. Just have one side that is a little bit warm. And the way I've dropped it in, I'll probably get some cauliflower bloomy things, which I like if you put it in foliage, it kind of adds a little bit of this organic looking foliagey look to it. All right, pretty thick. Let's get a little more ultramarine blue, just in a couple of spots to deepen that up. All right, we'll see how that one dries. I'm going to go over to this side. Do kind of the same thing. I love these, you know, that have been kind of outside and in unprotected places. They just have this gnarly character to them. Some of them kind of lean and are twisted depending on the wind and what's kind of growing next to them, or if any vines have grown up into it or in the surrounding area. I'll come over to my little border. Do the same thing with a little bit of a new gamboge and then some ultramarine. Deepen some of those places. You can even drop in a little bit of burnt sienna. Not too much. All right, now let's go back and finish some of our weeds and reeds and talk about the snowy areas. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to go back to some of my warm grays. And just make some almost wiggly, curly lines. And I'm up on the tip of this brush. It's got a pretty fine tip. And that kind of keeps this from looking too much like a pile of sticks poking up. Now, I want a bit of gray or something to kind of soften that bottom. I'm going to do that with a little bit of a blue-gray. And I might just take a really watery gray. Just to kind of indicate some footsteps that have been walking into the snowy area. Where the snow sort of gets trampled down. Let's see if I can soften that edge just a bit. A bit of a damp brush. Seems like, I don't know, when you've got that soft light on a snowy day, everything just appears kind of soft. Like there's no hard edges. I almost want to just blur that a little, but not go too crazy. All right, I think that's going to be it. I'll fill in the banner, my borders. I might soften these because I made this a little dark, a lot darker than I did my previous wall. So I might soften this a little bit. I really don't want them being quite that dark. I'm just taking water to see if I can lift it. I might, you know, I got too much wet stuff going on. I may end up smearing something, so I need to back out and just let this be. I've got some green running in here. Yeah, I don't really need that. All right, we'll let it be. We'll let this dry. See what gives. Anyway, that is January 7th. Snowy January day in Connecticut. Thanks for watching. Bye.